The pregnancy test felt like it was burning a hole through my purse. I'd shoved it to the bottom that morning, wrapped in tissues and buried beneath my wallet, keys, and the lipstick I never wore but always carried. As if hiding it deeper would somehow make it less real, less terrifying. Less like the single piece of evidence that could destroy the carefully constructed lie I'd been living for the past 3 months. My hands trembled as I poured coffee for the morning regulars at Rossi's Café, the little Italian coffee shop in Chicago's River North where I'd worked the opening shift for the past 2 years. The espresso machine hissed and groaned, filling the air with the rich scent of dark roast that used to comfort me but now made my stomach turn. Morning sickness. Week 10. According to the app I'd downloaded on a burner phone and hidden in my apartment like contraband. "You all right, sweetheart? Mrs.?" Castellano asked from her usual corner table, her sharp eyes missing nothing as they always did. She'd been coming here since before I started, probably since the place opened 30 years ago, and she watched everyone who walked through that door like she was cataloging their secrets. "Just tired?" I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Didn't sleep well. That, at least, was true. I hadn't slept well in weeks. Not since the night I'd realized my period was late. Not since I'd taken that first test in a gas station bathroom at 2 a.m. And definitely not since I'd taken 4 more tests just to be absolutely, devastatingly sure. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up out of habit, my practiced smile already in place. Then my entire body went cold. Dante Moretti stood in the doorway like he owned it, like he owned everything. Which, in this neighborhood, he basically did. He was exactly as I remembered from 3 months ago, tall enough that he had to duck slightly under the doorframe, his dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, his charcoal suit fitting his broad shoulders in a way that screamed custom tailoring and old money. But it was his eyes that always got me, storm gray and penetrating. The kind of eyes that saw too much and forgot nothing. The kind of eyes that were currently fixed directly on me. My heart stuttered in my chest. What was he doing here? Dante Moretti didn't come to places like Rossi's. He had people to bring him coffee, to run his errands, to handle the mundane details of daily life while he ran an empire that existed in the shadows between Chicago's legitimate business world and something far more dangerous. I knew what he was. Everyone in this neighborhood knew what the Morettis were, even if we all pretended not to notice the black SUVs with tinted windows, the men in expensive suits who spoke in Italian and never smiled, the way certain businesses never seemed to have problems with theft or vandalism while others that didn't pay the right tributes mysteriously burned down. And I knew I should have stayed away from him that night 3 months ago. But I hadn't. Gabriella. His voice was exactly as I remembered it, deep, slightly accented, with an edge of command that made it clear he was used to being obeyed. He moved through the cafe like he was parting water, customers instinctively leaning away from him, creating a path. "Mr. Moretti." My voice came out steadier than I felt. Professional, distant, as if we hadn't spent one perfect, impossible night together, as if I wasn't currently carrying his child and hiding that fact with every fiber of my being. He reached the counter, and I was suddenly, viscerally aware of how close he was. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody that made my traitorous body respond despite my terror. Close enough that I could see the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw, the tiny scar above his left eyebrow that I'd traced with my fingers in the dark. "Just coffee?" I asked, my hand already moving toward a to-go cup. "Please just be coffee. Please just let him order and leave and never come back. I need to talk to you." His eyes never left my face, studying me with an intensity that made me feel like he could see straight through to the secret I was hiding. Privately, every muscle in my body tensed. "I'm working. It's important. So is my job." I turned away, busying myself with the espresso machine, even though there were no orders to fill. "Whatever you need to say, you can say it here or not at all." I felt rather than saw him move closer, leaning against the counter in a way that was casual but somehow still commanding. "Gabriella, look at me." I didn't want to. Looking at Dante Moretti was dangerous. It's what had gotten me into this. The situation in the first place. Looking at him across a crowded charity gala, where I'd been serving champagne, meeting those gray eyes and feeling something shift in my chest. Looking at him had led to conversation, and conversation had led to him waiting for me after my shift ended, and that had led to the back of his car and then his penthouse and then the single most passionate, reckless, unforgettable night of my 24 years. Looking at him had led to the pregnancy test currently hidden in my purse. But I looked anyway, because refusing would have drawn more attention, and the last thing I needed was Mrs. Castellano or any of the other regulars watching this interaction too closely. "What do you want?" I asked quietly. Something flickered in his expression. Frustration, maybe, or concern. "You've been avoiding me. I've been working. You blocked my number. I lost my phone." The lie came easily. I'd had plenty of practice lying over the past few weeks. His jaw tightened, that suggested he was controlling his temper with effort. "You disappeared, Gabriella. After that night, you vanished like you'd never existed. I went to your apartment, you'd moved. I tried to find you at the catering company you quit. For 3 months, I've had people searching for you." Ice flooded my veins. He'd had people searching. Of course he had. Men like Dante Moretti didn't just let things go, didn't accept rejection or disappearance. They pursued, they investigated. They found what they were looking for, which meant it was only a matter of time before he discovered the truth. "I don't owe you anything," I said, proud of how steady my voice remained. "We spent one night together. That doesn't give you ownership of my life." "Ownership?" His voice dropped, became dangerous. "Is that what you think this is about? Isn't it?" I met his eyes directly, channeling 3 months of fear and frustration into false courage. "Men like you, you're used to having whatever you want. But I'm not for sale, Mr. Moretti. Not for a night, not for however long you thought you'd keep me interested." The words hit their mark. I saw it in the way his expression hardened, the way his hands clenched briefly at his sides before he forced them to relax. Good. Let him be angry. Let him think I was just another woman who'd used him for a night of luxury and then moved on. Anything was better than him discovering the truth. "You're right," he said after a long moment, his voice cold now, controlled. "I apologize for disturbing you at work. I won't bother you again." He turned to leave, and relief flooded through me so intensely it made me dizzy. He was going. He was actually walking away. I'd convinced him, made him believe I was just... My purse fell. I'd set it on the shelf beneath the counter, and somehow maybe when I'd turned too quickly, maybe when my elbow had knocked against it, it tumbled to the floor, spilling its contents across the worn tile in a cascade of wallet and keys and lipstick and receipts and... The pregnancy test. It landed face up, the 2 pink lines clearly visible even from where Dante had frozen near the door. Time seemed to stop. Every sound in the cafe, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversations, the scrape of chair legs against tile faded into white noise as Dante slowly, deliberately turned back around. His eyes went to the test, then to me, then back to the test. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except watch as he crossed back to the counter in 3 long strides and bent down to pick up the test, his movements careful, almost gentle, as if it might shatter in his hands. When he straightened, his face was completely blank, that terrifying blankness that meant he was processing something too big for immediate reaction, calculating and analyzing and coming to conclusions I desperately didn't want him to reach. "How long?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the cafe noise like a blade. "How long have you known?" I looked around frantically. Mrs. Castellano was watching now, her eyes sharp with interest. The young couple in the corner had paused their conversation. Even Tony, the owner, had emerged from the kitchen, his expression concerned. "Not here," I managed to say. "Please, Dante, not here." He looked at the test in his hand, then at my face, then at my body, and I watched as his eyes traced the lines of my loose sweater, the way I'd been dressing for weeks now to hide the slight swell that had begun to show. The way I held myself, one hand unconsciously protective over my stomach. Understanding dawned in his expression, sharp and immediate, Mine? The single word carried the weight of 1,000 questions. I couldn't deny it. Not with him holding the proof. Not with his eyes boring into mine like he could extract the truth through sheer force of will. I nodded once, barely a movement. But it was enough. The pregnancy test clattered to the counter as Dante's hand shook, actually shook before he seemed to realize it and clenched his fist. His eyes closed briefly, his chest rising and falling with breaths that looked like they were taking effort to control. When he opened his eyes again, they were blazing with something I couldn't quite name. Fury, yes, but something else beneath it. Something raw and wounded and desperately vulnerable. "How long?" he repeated, and this time his voice cracked slightly on the words. "How long have you known you were carrying my child?" 10 weeks, I whispered. "I found out 10 weeks ago." I watched the calculation happen in his eyes. 10 weeks of knowing, 3 months of hiding, the exact length of time I'd been avoiding him, blocking his calls, vanishing from his life. "You knew." His voice was flat now, emotionless in a way that was somehow more frightening than rage. "You've known for 10 weeks that you were pregnant with my baby, and you didn't tell me. You blocked me. You hid from me. You let me think." He stopped, his jaw working. "What exactly did you think I would do, Gabriella? What possible reason could you have for keeping this from me?" "Because I know what you are," I said, and the words came out sharper than I intended, edged with all the fear I'd been carrying. "I know who you are, Dante. What you do, the world you live in, and I will not bring a child into that darkness." Something dangerous flashed across his face. "You will not? You don't get to make that decision alone. This is my child. This is my body," I shot back. "My life. My choice. And my son or daughter." His hand slammed down on the counter, making me jump. Several customers looked over, their conversations dying. "My blood. My family. You think you can just decide I don't deserve to know? To be involved? I think I can decide what's best for my baby. Our baby," he corrected, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet again. "Our baby, Gabriella. Whether you like it or not, whether you approve of who I am or what I do, that child is half mine, and I have rights." "You have nothing," I said, fear making me cruel. "You're a criminal, Dante. Do you really think I'm going to let my child grow up around violence and blood money? Learning that the way to solve problems is with intimidation and force? Watching their father," I stopped, unable to continue, my eyes burning with tears I refused to shed. He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, very softly, "I see. You've already decided what kind of father I'll be. What kind of man I am. Based on what, Gabriella? Rumors? Your imagination?" "Based on reality," I said. "I'm not stupid, Dante. I've lived in this neighborhood my whole life. I know what the Moretti family does. I know why everyone here pays you respect. And it's not because you're such a generous philanthropist." "You're right," he said. And the admission took me by surprise. "I'm not going to stand here and lie to you about who I am or what I do. But what you don't know, what you didn't bother to find out before making this decision for both of us, is that I would never, ever let any harm come to my child, or to the woman carrying that child." The gentleness in his voice was somehow more devastating than his earlier anger. "I need you to leave," I said quietly. "Please, Dante, just go." "I'm not going anywhere." He pulled out his phone, pressed a single button, and said, "Luca, bring the car to Rossi's. Now." Then he looked at me. "You're coming with me. We're going to talk about this properly, somewhere private where you can't run away or make a scene." "I'm not going anywhere with you." My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "You can't just order me around like I'm one of your employees. Watch me." He came around the counter before I could react, his hand closing around my wrist, not painfully, but firmly enough that I couldn't pull away without making an obvious struggle. "You've had 3 months to handle this your way, Gabriella. Now we're going to handle it my way. This is kidnapping," I hissed, very aware of the eyes on us, of Mrs. Castellano already reaching for her phone. "This is a conversation that's 3 months overdue." he corrected. And I promise you, the alternative, me standing here demanding answers while everyone in this cafe listens, is much worse for both of us. He was right. And I hated that he was right. Already I could see people whispering, phones being pulled out. By tonight, everyone in the neighborhood would know that Dante Moretti had shown up at Rossi's and dragged the counter girl out by the wrist. The speculation would be endless, and probably damaging to both of us. Fine, I said through gritted teeth. Let me get my purse. He released my wrist immediately, but his eyes tracked my every movement as I bent to gather my spilled belongings, shoving everything back into my bag with shaking hands. The pregnancy test last, folded carefully into a tissue like that would somehow preserve my dignity. Tony appeared beside us, his weathered face concerned. Ella, you okay? You want me to call someone? She's fine, Dante said before I could respond. His hand settled on the small of my back, possessive and protective at once. We just need to talk privately. I'll have her back within the hour. Ella? Tony looked at me, making it clear the decision was mine, despite Dante's presence. I wanted to say no, wanted to make a scene, to demand he call the police, even though we both knew how useless that would be. But the pregnancy test was in my purse, the truth was out, and running would only delay the inevitable. It's okay, I heard myself say. I'll be back soon. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. A black SUV pulled up outside, sleek and expensive with windows tinted so dark they were probably illegal. A man I recognized vaguely, Luca, Dante's driver and bodyguard, got out and opened the rear door without a word. Dante guided me outside with that hand still pressed to my back, and I was suddenly, viscerally aware of how much danger I might be in. I was getting into a car with a MAFIA boss who I'd deliberately deceived, who'd just discovered I was pregnant with his child. A man whose reputation included violence and ruthlessness in equal measure. What if I'd miscalculated? What if his desire for control extended to eliminating problems? What if... Breathe. Dante murmured near my ear as we reached the car, his voice losing some of its edge. You're panicking. I can see it. Whatever you're imagining right now, it's wrong. I'm not going to hurt you, Gabriella. I would never hurt you or our baby. We're just going to talk. Where? I managed to ask. Somewhere private. Somewhere you can yell at me if you need to without an audience. He helped me into the SUV with a hand under my elbow. Surprisingly gentle despite everything. The interior was exactly as I remembered: leather seats that probably cost more than my monthly rent, tinted windows that made the bright morning seem dim and distant, the faint scent of his cologne that made my stomach flip for reasons that had nothing to do with morning sickness. Dante slid in beside me, close enough that his thigh pressed against mine in the confined space. Luca got in the driver's seat without a word, and we were moving before I could fully process what was happening. How long have you been working at that cafe? Dante asked after several blocks of tense silence. The mundane question threw me. 2 years. Why? And before that? I worked at a hotel, front desk. Before that, waitressing. I didn't see the point in lying. Why does it matter? It matters because I'm trying to understand. He turned to face me, his expression serious. You're smart, Gabriella. I saw that the night we met, the way you talked about art, about literature, about everything. So why are you working minimum wage? Jobs and living in that apartment in Wicker Park? Heat flooded my cheeks. You went to my apartment? I told you. I've been looking for you. And when I finally found your address, you'd already moved. Didn't leave a forwarding address. Didn't tell the landlord where you were going. His eyes narrowed. You were running from me even before you knew you were pregnant. He was too observant, too intelligent. And he was right, I had been running. Even that first morning after our night together, when I'd woken up in his penthouse and realized the magnitude of what I'd done. I left because what we had was one night, I said carefully. It was incredible, but it wasn't real. We're from different worlds, Dante. I gestured vaguely at the luxury car, at him in his expensive suit. And I'm a girl who serves coffee for tips. It was never going to work. So you decided for both of us that it wasn't worth trying? There was hurt underneath his controlled tone. Real, genuine hurt. that I hadn't expected. You left without a word, blocked my number, and then when you found out you were pregnant, you just… What? Hoped I'd never find out? Yes, I admitted quietly. That was exactly my plan. He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. Did it ever occur to you that I might want to be a father? That I might want to be involved in my child's life? Did it ever occur to you that I might not want my child to have a father like you? The words came out harsher than I intended, but I was tired of dancing around the truth. I know what you are, Dante. Everyone does. And maybe you can justify it to yourself. Maybe in your world it all makes sense. But I won't raise a child in that violence. I won't let my son or daughter grow up thinking that's normal. The car had stopped. I looked out the window and realized we were in the parking garage of a high-rise building in the Loop. One of those glass towers that housed million-dollar condos. For people who could afford private elevators and rooftop terraces. We're here, Dante said, his voice carefully neutral. And we're going to have a real conversation, Gabriella. One where you stop assuming you know everything about me based on reputation and gossip. One where you actually listen. And if I don't want to? His eyes met mine, and I saw the steel beneath the gentleness. Then I'll get my lawyers involved. I'll establish paternity, fight for custody, make this as complicated and difficult as it needs to be to ensure I'm part of my child's life. Or you can talk to me, really talk to me, and maybe we can find a solution that works for all three of us. The threat was clear. Cooperate, or be forced. I thought about fighting, about demanding Luca take me back to the cafe, about running again the way I'd been running for 3 months. But I was tired. So tired of carrying this secret alone, of making every decision in fear, of lying awake at night wondering what would happen when Dante inevitably found out. And now he had found out. There was no more hiding, no more pretending. Just the truth standing between us, impossible to ignore. Fine, I said quietly. Let's talk. The penthouse was exactly as I remembered it, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than I'd earn in 5 years, art on the walls that looked like it belonged in a museum, everything pristine and perfectly arranged, a showcase of wealth and power that made my second-hand clothes and scuffed shoes feel even more inadequate. Dante guided me to a plush sofa near the windows, his hand still at the small of my back in that possessive way that sent contradictory signals through my nervous system. Part of me wanted to shake him off, to establish boundaries and independence, but another part, the part that was exhausted and scared, and secretly craved the protection he was offering, wanted to lean into that touch and let someone else carry the weight for a while. Water? Tea? He asked, already moving toward the open kitchen. You should stay hydrated. Water's fine. I sank onto the sofa, suddenly aware of how tired I was. The morning shift at the cafe started at 5:30, which meant I'd been up since 4:45. Add in the constant low-grade nausea and the emotional whiplash of the past hour, and I felt like I could sleep for a week. He returned with a glass of water, and what looked like sparkling water with lemon for himself. No alcohol, I noticed. A courtesy maybe, or just coincidence. He sat in the chair across from me, rather than beside me on the sofa giving me space, I realized, trying not to crowd me. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Really looked, the way we hadn't been able to in the cafe with all those eyes watching. I could see details now, that the shock had worn off slightly, the faint shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well either, the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw kept tightening like he was physically restraining himself from saying everything he wanted to say at once. 10 weeks, he said finally. You found out 10 weeks ago. I nodded, my hands wrapped around the water glass like it could anchor me. And you're what, 13? 14 weeks along now? 13 weeks and 4 days, I said quietly. According to the doctor. His eyes closed briefly, and I watched his hands clench on his knees before deliberately relaxing. You've been going to doctor appointments, alone. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. Taking prenatal vitamins? Following medical advice? Making sure everything's… His voice cracked slightly. Making sure the baby's healthy? Of course I am. Anger flared through my exhaustion. What did you think, Dante? That I'd just ignore my pregnancy? Not take care of myself? I don't know what to think, he shot back. Because I don't know you, Gabriella. Not really. We had one night together. One perfect night where I thought. He stopped, ran a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration that disrupted its perfect styling. I thought we had a connection. Something real. And then you vanished. And now I find out you've been carrying my child for 3 months without telling me. So no, I don't know what you would or wouldn't do. The raw honesty in his voice made my chest ache. He was right. We didn't really know each other. One night of incredible chemistry and conversation didn't constitute a relationship, didn't give us the foundation to navigate something as complicated as an unexpected pregnancy. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I was scared. Of me? The question came out almost vulnerable. Specifically of me, or just the situation? Both. I set down the water glass and wrapped my arms around myself. That night was amazing, Dante. It was everything I didn't know I wanted. But when I woke up the next morning and really looked at where I was, who you were, I panicked. I realized I'd slept with a man I barely knew, a man with a reputation that should have sent me running, and when you weren't there when you'd already left for whatever business you had, it felt like a sign. I had a meeting I couldn't miss. His voice was tight. I left you a note. On the nightstand. I blinked. What note? The note that said I'd be back by noon. That you should order whatever you wanted for breakfast. That I wanted to take you to brunch. He leaned forward intently. You're telling me you didn't see it? There was no note. I tried to remember that morning. The panicked awakening in unfamiliar sheets. The hurried gathering of my clothes. I woke up alone and I left. I didn't look around. I just grabbed my things and went. Understanding and frustration warred across his expression. So you thought I'd used you for a night and discarded you. That's why you blocked my number when I called. You called that morning? My voice came out small. I called 6 times that morning. Left voicemails, sent texts. His jaw tightened. All of which you never received because you'd already decided I was exactly what you expected, a rich man who'd taken what he wanted and moved on. Guilt twisted in my stomach. I'd made assumptions, jumped to conclusions based on prejudice and fear, rather than giving him a chance to explain. But even knowing that, even feeling bad about it, I couldn't completely regret my choice to run. Even if I'd gotten the note, I said carefully. Even if I'd known you wanted to see me again. It wouldn't have changed the fundamental problem. You're Dante Moretti. Your family, your business, it's not something I can just ignore or pretend doesn't exist. No, he agreed. It's not. But you could have talked to me about your concerns instead of making decisions about our child's future in a vacuum. Our child. I tested the words, and they felt strange in my mouth. For 3 months this had been my secret, my problem, my decision. Hearing Dante claim ownership, even justified ownership, made it terrifyingly real in a new way. You keep saying that like it means something, like you actually want to be involved. Of course I want to be involved. He looked at me like I'd said something incomprehensible. Gabriella, this is my child, my son or daughter. Why would you think I wouldn't want that? Because men like you. I stopped, reconsidering. I'm sorry. I'm doing it again, aren't I? Making assumptions. Yes. But his voice was gentler now. So let me tell you some facts, instead of letting you rely on assumptions. Fact 1. I'm 33 years old, and I've never had a child. Never even come close. This baby, if I'd known about it, would have been the most important thing in my life from the moment I found out. Fact 2. My father was a violent, abusive man who terrorized my mother and my sister. I watched what that did to them. I swore I would never be like him, never let my children experience what I experienced. And fact 3. Whether you believe it or not, I have been working for the past 2 years to transition my family's business into legitimate operations. This isn't new, Gabriella. I've been planning this since before we met. I stared at him, trying to process this information. You're getting out? Of the illegal stuff? Gradually, carefully. You don't just walk away from an organization like mine overnight. He leaned back, and I could see the weight of it in his posture. But yes, I'm divesting from anything that could put my family at risk. The legitimate businesses, real estate, restaurants, import-export, those stay and grow. Everything else gets transferred to associates or shut down entirely. Why? The question came out before I could stop it. If you've been doing this your whole life, why change now? His eyes met mine, and there was something vulnerable in them. Because I'm tired, Gabriella. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of making enemies. Tired of being the thing people fear instead of respect. My father built this empire on violence and intimidation, and I inherited it when I was 23 and too young to know better. But I'm not that young anymore, and I've seen enough death to last several lifetimes. He paused. I want something different, something better, and finding out I'm going to be a father makes that transition even more urgent. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe every word, but I'd spent 3 months convincing myself that keeping this secret was the right choice, that Dante Moretti was exactly what his reputation suggested, and changing that entire worldview in a single conversation felt impossible. How do I know you're telling the truth? I asked quietly. How do I know this isn't just what you think I want to hear? You don't. The blunt honesty surprised me. You're going to have to take a risk, Gabriella. Trust me, despite your fears. Let me prove through actions, not just words, that I mean what I say. He leaned forward again, his elbows on his knees. But I need you to give me that chance. Stop hiding from me. Let me be part of this pregnancy, part of our child's life. Please. The please broke something in me. Dante Moretti, who commanded respect through force and presence, was asking me for something. Not demanding, not threatening, just asking with a vulnerability that felt painfully genuine. I don't know how this works, I admitted. I don't know how to let you in without losing myself completely. Your world is so different from mine, Dante. You have money and power and resources I can't even imagine. What happens when you decide you know better than me about what's good for our baby? When you override my decisions because you can? Then we establish boundaries now. He stood, began pacing near the windows in that restless way that suggested he was thinking through strategies. We agree on ground rules, things we both promise to honor regardless of disagreements. Like what? He stopped, turned to face me. Like major decisions get made together. Medical care, living arrangements, education. When the time comes, we both have equal say. Like you maintain your independence and autonomy. I'm not trying to control you, Gabriella. I'm trying to co-parent with you. There's a difference. Is there? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. You literally kidnapped me from my workplace an hour ago. I asked you to come talk. You agreed. But guilt flickered across his face. Though I acknowledge the power imbalance made that agreement somewhat coerced. I'm sorry. I was angry and shocked and not thinking clearly. The apology surprised me more than anything else he'd said. Men like Dante Moretti didn't apologize, did they? Didn't admit to mistakes or acknowledge when they'd overstepped? Except apparently this one did. I have conditions. I heard myself say, if we're going to try this, if I'm going to let you be involved, I have conditions that aren't negotiable. Interest sparked in his eyes. Tell me. First, I want complete honesty about your business. No secrets, no lies of omission. If you're truly transitioning to legitimate operations, I want regular updates on that progress. Proof, not just promises. Agreed. He didn't even hesitate. What else? Second, my child, our child, doesn't get exposed to any of the illegal aspects of what you do. No meetings at the house, no conversations they might overhear, no casual violence like it's normal. If you can't guarantee that, then I walk away and you'll have to fight me in court. His expression hardened, but he nodded. Agreed. The child will be kept completely separate from business. Any business, legitimate or otherwise, until they're old enough to understand and make their own choices. Third, I took a breath, knowing this one would be harder. I keep working. I keep my apartment. I maintain my own life and independence. You don't get to swoop in and take over everything just because you have the resources to do it. He was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with this one. The working I understand, though I'd like to help ensure it's not too physically demanding given your condition. But the apartment, Gabriella. He stopped, visibly gathering patience. I saw where you were living, before you moved. It wasn't safe. It was fine. The locks were broken. The neighborhood had 3 shootings last month, and the building code violations alone were… He caught himself. I'm doing it again. Being controlling. But can we compromise on this one? What if I help you find a place that's safer, but still gives you that independence? You choose the apartment, you pay what you can afford. I cover the difference without interfering in your daily life. It was more reasonable than I expected. More than I probably deserved given that I'd hidden the pregnancy for 3 months. I want to think about it. Fair enough. He moved back to his chair, sat down with that controlled grace that made every movement look intentional. What else? That's it for now. I twisted my hands in my lap. But I reserve the right to add more as situations arise. Agreed. He pulled out his phone, began typing. I'm putting all of this in writing. Ground rules for co-parenting. We'll both sign it, have it notarized, make it official. That way there's no confusion later about what we agreed to. The fact that he was taking this so seriously, treating my conditions with the same gravity he'd probably give a business contract, made something loosen in my chest. Maybe he really did mean it. Maybe this could actually work. I want to ask you something, Dante said, setting his phone aside. And I need you to be completely honest with me. Tension crept back into my shoulders. Okay. Did you consider terminating the pregnancy? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. I thought about lying, about softening the truth, but we just agreed to complete honesty. Yes, I said quietly. I thought about it, made an appointment at a clinic, sat in the parking lot for an hour trying to make myself go inside. I looked down at my hands, but I couldn't do it. Not because of any moral judgment against people who make that choice, but because I wanted this baby. Even terrified, even alone, I wanted them. His eyes were suspiciously bright when I looked up. Thank you, he said roughly, for choosing to continue the pregnancy, for wanting our child even when you were scared. I'm still scared, I admitted. Terrified, actually. I don't know how to be a mother. Don't know if I'll be any good at it. And now you're here, and there's this whole other layer of complication, and my voice broke. I don't know how to do this, Dante. He was up and moving before I realized it, crossing to the raw sofa and sitting beside me. Not touching, but close enough that I could feel his warmth, his solidity. We'll figure it out together. Both of us learning as we go, making mistakes and fixing them and trying to do better. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's probably going to be complicated and messy and frustrating. He smiled slightly. But it's also going to be worth it. We're going to have a child, Gabriella. A little person who's half you and half me. That's terrifying, yes. But it's also incredible. I found myself smiling back despite everything. When did you get so philosophical? When I found out I was going to be a father approximately. He glanced at his watch. 2 hours and 17 minutes ago. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The laugh that escaped me was watery but genuine. This is insane. You know that, right? We barely know each other, we're from completely different worlds, and now we're having a baby together. Insane, he agreed, but not necessarily bad. Some of the best things in life are a little insane. We sat in silence for a moment, and I felt some of the tension that had been coiled in my chest for 3 months finally begin to ease. This wasn't resolved, we had so much still to figure out, so many potential conflicts waiting to emerge. But for the first time since seeing those 2 pink lines on the test, I didn't feel completely alone. I should get back to work, I said eventually. Tony's probably wondering what happened to me. Call him. Dante pulled out his phone, handed it to me. Tell him you're not feeling well and need to take the rest of the day. Which is true, you've had a shock. You need rest. I can't just not show up. I need that job, Dante. The money is not something you need to worry about anymore, he interrupted, gently. I know you want to maintain your independence, and I respect that. but you're carrying my child, Gabriella. That makes your well-being my responsibility, whether you like it or not. If you lose wages because of today, I'll cover it. If you need to reduce your hours or switch to less physically demanding work, I'll make sure you're financially stable. This isn't me trying to control you. It's me taking care of my family. My family. The words sent a shiver through me that wasn't entirely fear. One day at a time, I said quietly. We figure this out one day at a time. Today, I call Tony and tell him I'm sick. Tomorrow we'll figure out tomorrow when it comes. One day at a time, Dante echoed. I can work with that. I called Tony, who was understanding if slightly concerned about my abrupt departure with Dante Moretti. I kept it vague, not feeling well. Needed to rest. Would explain more later. He told me to take care of myself and not to worry about the shift. When I hung up, I realized I was exhausted. The adrenaline that had been keeping me upright was draining away, leaving behind bone-deep weariness. You should rest, Dante said, clearly reading my fatigue. The guest room is made up, or you can take my bed if you prefer. I have work I need to handle anyway. The offer was tempting. My apartment was 40 minutes away by train, and the thought of navigating public transportation while emotionally wrung out made me want to cry. But staying here, in Dante's space, felt like crossing a line I wasn't sure I was ready to cross. I should go home, I said with absolutely no conviction. You can barely keep your eyes open. He stood, held out his hand. Please, Gabriella, rest for a few hours. I promise I won't bother you, won't push for more conversation. Just sleep. Take care of yourself and the baby. The concern in his voice, the genuine worry in his eyes, made the decision for me. I took his hand, let him pull me to my feet. Just a few hours, I agreed. He led me down a hallway I vaguely remembered from that night 3 months ago, to a bedroom that was clearly a guest space but still nicer than anywhere I'd ever lived. Neutral colors, a bed that looked sinfully comfortable, blackout curtains that promised uninterrupted sleep. There are clothes in the dresser if you want to change, Dante said from the doorway. Probably too big, but more comfortable than your work uniform. And the bathroom is through there if you need anything. Thank you. I turned to face him, this dangerous, complicated man who was the father of my child. For all of this, for not being angry, or for being angry but handling it like an adult instead of— I didn't finish the sentence. Instead of what? His voice was quiet. What did you think I'd do, Gabriella? When I found out, I don't know, the honest answer. Maybe try to take the baby from me, or force me to, I don't know. Marry you or sign away my rights or something. Pain flickered across his expression. Is that really what you think of me? That I'd hurt you or coerce you or try to take your child? I didn't know what to think, I said. I was scared and pregnant and alone, and all I knew about you was your reputation. Can you blame me for being cautious? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, very softly, No, I can't blame you, but I can promise you, right now, that I will spend every day proving that you were wrong to be afraid, that I'm not the monster you imagined. He left before I could respond, closing the door gently behind him. I changed into one of his t-shirts, soft cotton that smelled like his cologne and hung to mid-thigh on me, and crawled into the guest bed. The sheets were impossibly soft, the mattress perfectly firm, and within minutes I was drifting off despite my racing thoughts. My last conscious thought was that I'd made a terrible mistake 3 months ago, running without giving Dante a chance. And now I was going to have to learn to trust him, to build something with him, while navigating the impossible complications of his world and mine colliding. But as sleep pulled me under, I realized something else. For the first time in 3 months, I didn't feel alone. Terrified, yes. Uncertain, absolutely, but not alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start with. I woke to darkness and confusion, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar room and the soft sheets that definitely weren't mine. Then memory crashed back, the pregnancy test falling, Dante's face when he'd understood, the conversation that had upended my carefully maintained isolation. I checked my phone. 7:30 in the evening. I'd slept for almost 6 hours. My stomach growled, reminding me that I'd barely eaten today between morning sickness and emotional chaos. I needed food, needed to figure out how to get home, needed to process everything that had happened. When I emerged from the guest room, I found Dante in the kitchen. He'd changed from his suit into dark jeans and a casual button-down with the sleeves rolled up, and he was doing something at the stove that smelled incredible. "You're cooking," I said, surprised. He looked up, and something warm flickered in his eyes when he saw me wearing his shirt. "You're awake. I was going to check on you in another 30 minutes. How are you feeling?" "Hungry," I admitted, and confused about what day it is. "It's still Tuesday, and you're in luck. I make an excellent carbonara." He gestured to the breakfast bar. "Sit. This is almost ready." I slid onto one of the high stools, watching as he efficiently plated pasta that looked restaurant quality. "You really cook?" My mother insisted all her children learn. Said she wouldn't raise sons who couldn't take care of themselves. Something sad crossed his expression. She died when I was 16, but I still remember her lessons. "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate. "About your mother. She would have loved knowing. About the baby." He set a plate in front of me, along with sparkling water and a napkin. "She always wanted grandchildren. Used to tell me and my brothers that we were taking too long, that she'd be ancient before we gave her grandbabies to spoil." I took a bite of the pasta and nearly moaned. It was perfect, creamy and salty with just the right amount of pepper. "This is incredible. Family recipe." He fixed his own plate, sat across from me at the bar. "So, we should probably talk about practical matters, like where you're living now, since you moved from the last place I knew about." I'd been dreading this conversation. "Logan Square, near the blue line." His expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "The building on Kedzie? With the broken security door and no elevator? How do you—" I stopped. "Your people. You had them tracking me." "I had them trying to find you," he corrected. "Once I knew you'd moved, I had someone check out your new place to make sure you were safe. When I saw the building condition, I wanted to—" He stopped, visibly controlling himself. "I wanted to move you somewhere better immediately, but I didn't know if doing that would scare you off permanently. So you just had someone watching me, making sure I was okay? I wasn't sure if I should be creeped out or touched." "Making sure you weren't in immediate danger," he clarified. "And yes, I know that's an invasion of privacy. I know it crosses lines. But Gabriella, I thought you'd left because I'd done something wrong, because that night had meant nothing to you. I couldn't just forget about you, couldn't stop worrying that you were in trouble or needed help. So yes, once I finally found you again, I had someone keeping very distant tabs. No surveillance inside your apartment," he added quickly. "No invasion of your actual privacy. Just occasional check-ins to make sure the building was secure and you were safe." I should have been angry, should have felt violated by the admission. But sitting here, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes, understanding that he'd been worried about me all these months, I couldn't quite muster the outrage. "That's still creepy," I said, but without much heat. "I know. I'm sorry." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'll call them off now that we're talking. But Gabriella, that building isn't safe. The wiring is faulty. There have been 2 break-ins in the past month, and you're on the 3rd floor with no elevator. When you're further along in the pregnancy, when you're carrying a newborn—" He stopped. "I'm doing it again, being controlling. But I'm trying to express legitimate concern." "I know." I pushed pasta around my plate. "And you're right. It's not great, but it's what I can afford, and it's close to work and the train. I can't exactly move to the Gold Coast on a Café salary. What if—" He stopped, reconsidered. "What if we found somewhere in between? Not where I live, not the Gold Coast, but somewhere safer, more comfortable. Somewhere you could actually afford on your salary, but I could help with the security deposit or first few months' rent, just to get you established somewhere better." It was a reasonable compromise, more than reasonable, and yet accepting it felt like giving up independence I'd fought hard to maintain. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But I'm not making any decisions tonight. Today has been overwhelming enough. Fair. He cleared our empty plates, moved them to the sink with the kind of automatic domestic competence that surprised me. What else do we need to figure out in the immediate term? Doctor appointments. I pulled out my phone, opened the calendar where I'd been tracking everything. I have one next week. 20-week ultrasound. They'll be able to tell the sex if we want to know. His entire demeanor changed. Became almost eager. You'll let me come? To the appointment? You want to come to a prenatal appointment? I couldn't quite keep the surprise from my voice. Of course I want to come. He looked almost offended that I'd question it. Gabriella, this is my child. I want to be at every appointment, every milestone. I want to see the ultrasound images, hear the heartbeat, know that everything's developing properly. Unless you don't want me there? No, I hadn't expected this. Hadn't imagined that Dante Moretti, dangerous crime boss, would be the type to attend prenatal appointments and care about ultrasounds. I just thought you'd be too busy. Or not interested in the medical details. I'm never too busy for this, he said firmly. And I'm interested in everything. Send me the appointment details. I'll clear my schedule. Something warm unfurled in my chest. Maybe this could actually work. Maybe he really meant everything he was saying. Okay, I said softly. Next Thursday, 2 p.m. The clinic is in Pilsen. He was already pulling out his phone, adding it to his calendar. I'll be there. Is there anything else? Other appointments? Things you need? Concerns the doctor mentioned? Everything's been normal so far. Some morning sickness in the first trimester. But that's mostly past now. Weight gain is on track. No complications. I hesitated, though I probably should find a doctor closer to wherever I end up living. The Pilsen clinic is good, but if I move... I know an excellent obstetrician, Dante said. Dr. Sarah Chen. She's on Northwestern's staff, takes patients at a private practice in River North. I've sent business her way before legitimate business. He clarified at my look. Associates' wives, girlfriends who needed good prenatal care. She's discreet, competent, and used to dealing with high-risk situations. I'm not high risk, I protested. You're carrying the child of someone with enemies, he said bluntly. That makes you higher risk than average, whether you like it or not. Doctor, Chen understands the need for security and privacy. She won't ask questions, won't share information, and she'll make sure you get the best possible care. The reminder that his world came with dangers I hadn't fully considered sent a chill through me. Your enemies, would they really target me? The baby? His expression went cold in a way that was genuinely frightening. Not if they want to live. I'll make it very clear that you and the child are under my absolute protection. Anyone who touches you or even threatens you will face consequences that make death look merciful. That's not comforting, Dante. It's not meant to be comforting. It's meant to be true. He softened slightly. But realistically, the danger is minimal. Most of my business rivals respect family boundaries. It's an unwritten rule you don't go after children or pregnant women. Anyone who breaks that rule makes enemies of everyone in our world, not just me. So as long as people know you're mine, that the baby is mine, you're safer than you'd be as just a random civilian. I'm not. Yours, I said automatically. His eyes met mine, and there was something possessive in them that made my breath catch. You're the mother of my child. That makes you mine in every way that matters, whether we're together romantically or not. Get used to it, Gabriella, because I take care of what's mine, and I protect it with everything I have. The intensity in his voice should have scared me. Instead, it sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the memory of that night 3 months ago, when that same intensity had been focused on making me feel things I'd never felt before. I should go home, I said, my voice coming out huskier than intended. It's late, and I have the morning shift tomorrow. Stay. The word was quiet but absolute. Please. It's dark. You're tired. And honestly, I'd feel better knowing you're here and safe than worrying about you on the train at this hour. Dante. I'm not trying to pressure you, he interrupted. I can lock the guest room door if it makes you feel better. I won't bother you. But just stay. Let me take care of you for one night. Let me get used to the idea that I'm going to be a father and the woman carrying my child is actually here, in my space, real and safe, and not vanished into the city. The vulnerability in his request broke down my resistance. One night, I agreed, but I need to be up by 4:30 to make it to my shift on time. I'll have Luca drive you. Before I could protest, he held up a hand. Not controlling, practical. He'll get you there faster than the train, and you can sleep an extra 30 minutes. Please. Fine. I was too tired to argue. One night. But this doesn't become a pattern, Dante. I'm not moving in with you. Not yet, he said, and something in his tone made it clear he considered my resistance temporary. But we have 7 months to figure out the living arrangements. For tonight, just rest. Take care of yourself and our baby. Our baby. The words still felt strange, but less frightening than they had this morning. Maybe because I could see now that Dante meant them. He wasn't just paying lip service to fatherhood, he genuinely wanted to be involved, wanted to be part of this child's life. Whether that was a good thing or a terrifying complication, only time would tell. I retreated to the guest room, texted my roommate Emma that I was staying at a friend's place and would be back tomorrow, and tried to process everything that had happened in a single day. This morning I'd been a woman with a secret, terrified of discovery and determined to handle everything alone. Tonight I was a woman with a co-parent, a complicated, dangerous, surprisingly caring co-parent who cooked perfect carbonara and wanted to come to ultrasound appointments. My life had completely changed in the span of 12 hours. As I drifted off to sleep in Dante's impossibly comfortable guest bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, that the real complications were still ahead of us, waiting to emerge as my pregnancy progressed and the reality of co-parenting with a man from a completely different world became increasingly impossible to navigate. But for tonight, for this one night, I let myself feel safe, protected, not alone. Tomorrow I could go back to being cautious and independent. Tonight, I was just a tired pregnant woman being taken care of by the father of her child, and that was enough. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of adjustment and unexpected domesticity that terrified me as much as it comforted me. True to his word, Dante attended every doctor's appointment. He sat beside me during the anatomy scan at 20 weeks, his hand gripping mine so tightly I lost circulation as we watched our son move and kick on the ultrasound screen. When Dr. Chen pointed out the tiny fingers and toes, the perfect curve of his spine, the strong heartbeat that filled the room, I watched Dante's eyes fill with tears he didn't bother hiding. "A boy," he'd whispered afterward, his hand reverent on my now obvious belly. "We're having a boy, Gabriella." He'd been impossible after that, buying everything in sight despite my protests, insisting on reading every parenting book he could find, asking me dozens of questions about names and nursery themes and whether I wanted a baby shower. The intensity that made him dangerous in his business world was now focused entirely on preparing for fatherhood, and it was simultaneously overwhelming and touching. The apartment situation had resolved itself when Dante, completely behind my back, though he swore it was a coincidence, bought the building where I'd been living in Logan Square and immediately began renovations. My apartment suddenly had new locks, a functioning elevator that miraculously appeared within 2 weeks, updated wiring, and a security system that was probably overkill for the neighborhood. "You bought my building," I'd said flatly when he finally confessed. "I bought an investment property that happened to be your building," he'd corrected with zero shame. "And I'm making necessary improvements. Would you prefer I let you live somewhere unsafe?" I couldn't argue with the results, even if his methods were questionable. My rent stayed the same, he refused to raise it despite the improvements, and I had to admit that sleeping soundly without worrying about break-ins or electrical fires was worth swallowing my pride. We'd fallen into a routine of sorts. Dante would appear at the café most mornings, ostensibly for coffee but really to check on me. He'd have Luca drive me home after my shifts, refusing to let me take the train while pregnant. We'd have dinner together 3 or 4 times a week, either at his penthouse or increasingly at my newly renovated apartment, where he'd somehow convinced me to let him set up a second nursery, for when I have him overnight, he'd explained. Once he's born and you're comfortable with shared custody. The assumption that I'd let him take our newborn son overnight had started an argument that lasted 2 days. But eventually I'd conceded that yes, Dante deserved equal parenting time, and yes, having a nursery at his place made sense for when our son was old enough to be away from me for extended periods. I was learning to compromise, learning to let Dante be part of this. And terrifyingly, I was learning that I liked having him around. We hadn't slept together again, hadn't even kissed, despite the tension that sometimes crackled between us when he'd touch my belly or catch my eye across a room. We were co-parents, partners in preparing for our son's arrival, but we'd carefully maintained boundaries around anything romantic. Until the night everything changed. I was 26 weeks pregnant when Dante's past caught up with us in the worst possible way. It started with a phone call at 11 at night. I was at Dante's penthouse we'd been, going through baby names, debating between family names and something more modern when his phone rang with a tone I'd learned meant trouble. He stepped away to take it, his voice dropping to rapid Italian that I couldn't follow. But I could read his body language, the way his shoulders tensed, the way his free hand clenched into a fist, the cold fury that settled over his expression like a mask. When he returned, his face was carefully neutral. "I need to handle something. Luca will take you home." "What's wrong?" I stood, awkward with my growing belly. "Dante, what happened?" "Business." The single word was clipped, dismissive. "Nothing you need to worry about." "Don't do that." I moved closer, put my hand on his arm. "Don't shut me out." "We agreed complete honesty about your business, remember?" His jaw tightened. "There's been an incident. Someone tried to move product through my territory without permission. I need to send a message that makes it clear that kind of disrespect won't be tolerated." The clinical way he said it, "send a message," made my blood run cold. "What kind of message?" "The kind you don't want details about." He covered my hand with his, squeezed once. "Please, Gabriella, let me protect you from this part." "No." I pulled my hand away. "You promised me you were transitioning out of the illegal operations. You said the violence was behind you. Was that a lie?" "It's not a lie," he said, frustration bleeding into his voice. "The transition is happening, but it takes time. And in the meantime, I can't show weakness. If I let this slide, if I don't respond, it invites more challenges, more danger. The fastest way to complete the transition is to ensure no one thinks they can push me around during it. So you're going to hurt someone. Not a question. I'm going to make sure everyone remembers why challenging me is a mistake." His eyes were cold now, distant. This was the Dante I'd feared, the crime boss who solved problems with violence. "This is my world, Gabriella. You knew what I was when you agreed to let me be part of the baby's life." "I thought you were changing," I said, and hated how my voice shook. "I thought you wanted something different for our son." "I do, and I'm working toward it. But I can't flip a switch and make my reputation and responsibilities disappear overnight." He moved to the door, grabbed his jacket. "I'll call you tomorrow." "Luca will..." "Don't." The word came out sharp. "Don't call me tomorrow. Don't come by the cafe. Don't pretend this is okay." He turned, something dangerous flashing in his eyes. "You're angry. I understand that. But this is who I am right now. Not who I'll be forever, but who I am today. And I won't apologize for protecting what's mine." "I'm not yours," I said automatically, the old refrain. "You're carrying my son." He crossed back to me, his hand settling possessively on my belly where our baby was kicking. "That makes you mine in every way that matters, and I will do whatever is necessary to keep you both safe, even if you hate me for it." He left before I could respond, and I heard the penthouse door close with a finality that felt like an ending. Luca drove me home in tense silence. I didn't sleep that night, couldn't stop imagining what Dante was doing, what sending a message meant in his world. By morning, I'd convinced myself that I'd made a terrible mistake letting him into my life, that I should take our son and run before Dante's violence touched us. But when I checked my phone at 6 a.m., there was a text waiting. "It's done. No one was killed. I promised you I was trying to be different, and I meant it. Can we talk?" Relief and confusion warred in my chest. I didn't respond immediately, needed time to process my feelings. But throughout my shift at the cafe, I couldn't stop thinking about Dante's face when he'd felt our son kick. The gentle way he'd been preparing for fatherhood. The promises he'd made about transitioning to something legitimate. He was trying. Maybe not fast enough, maybe not perfectly, but he was trying to change for our son, for me. The question was whether trying was enough. I was still debating when I got home that evening and found Dante waiting outside my building. He looked exhausted, still wearing the same clothes from last night, and there was a fresh bruise along his jaw that made my stomach clench. "You're hurt," I said instead of the 100 other things I'd planned to say. "It's nothing." He straightened from where he'd been leaning against the wall. "Gabriella, I need to explain. Come inside." I unlocked the building door, led him upstairs to my apartment. Once we were inside, I pointed to the couch. "Sit, I'll get ice for your face." He obeyed silently, which was unusual enough that I knew he was genuinely worried about losing me. When I returned with an ice pack wrapped in a towel, I sat beside him and pressed it gently to his jaw. He winced but didn't pull away. "Tell me what?" I said, quietly. "Everything. No protecting me from the details." He was quiet for a long moment, his hand coming up to cover mine on the ice pack. The men who tried to move product through my territory were from an organization in Milwaukee. They thought my transition made me weak, made my territory vulnerable. If I'd let it go, more would have followed. There would have been a war. "So what did you do?" "I found them, made it clear that my territory remains my territory regardless of my future plans. Sent them back to Milwaukee with the message that the next group who tries this won't get off so easily." He met my eyes. "There was violence, yes, but no one died. I could have killed them. My men expected me to, but I didn't, because I promised you I was trying to be different." "You did this for me?" I asked, something complicated twisting in my chest. "I did it for our son." His free hand found my belly, settled there with familiar possessiveness. "So he can grow up with a father who's not a murderer. So when he's old enough to ask what I do, I can tell him about legitimate businesses instead of explaining why his father has blood on his hands." Tears burned my eyes. "You were hurt because you chose mercy over violence. It's worth it." He turned his head, pressed a kiss to my palm. "You're worth it. He's worth it. Everything I've built, every reputation I've cultivated, none of it matters if I lose you both. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was me, closing the distance between us. Maybe it was him, pulling me closer despite the awkward angle of my pregnant belly. But suddenly we were kissing, desperate and hungry and full of 3 months of denied tension. "Gabriella." He breathed against my lips, his hands framing my face. "Tell me to stop if this isn't what you want." "Don't stop," I whispered. "Please don't stop." We moved to my bedroom, relearning each other's bodies with the complication of my pregnancy between us. Dante was reverent and careful, his hands and mouth worshipping every change in my body with a tenderness that made me cry. When we finally came together, it felt like something clicking into place, not just physical satisfaction, but emotional rightness. Afterward, lying in his arms with his hand protective on my belly and our son kicking against his palm, I finally said the words I'd been holding back. "I love you." My voice was quiet but certain. "I've been fighting it for months, but I love you, Dante. Even scared, even uncertain about your world, I love you." His arms tightened around me. "I fell in love with you that first night," he admitted roughly. "When you talked about art and literature like they mattered more than money or power. When you looked at me like I was just a man, not a name or a reputation. I've loved you every day since, even when you were hiding from me. Especially when you were hiding from me, because it meant you cared enough to be afraid." "I'm still afraid," I admitted. "Of your world, of the violence, of whether we can really make this work." "So am I," he said, surprising me. "Terrified that I'll fail you, that I won't be able to protect you and our son, that my past will destroy our future. But I'm more afraid of not trying, of letting fear win instead of fighting for what we could have together." We stayed like that for hours, talking and planning, and making promises about the future we wanted to build. The transition would be complete within 6 months. Dante was accelerating his timeline, burning bridges with his illegal operations to ensure our son never had to witness his father's darker business. We'd move in together, not immediately but soon, giving me time to adjust to the idea of sharing space permanently. And we'd get married not because we had to, but because we wanted to make our family official. "I want to do this right," Dante said. "Court you properly, propose with a ring you choose, give you the wedding you deserve. Not rushing because of the baby, but because I want to spend my life with you." "I don't need elaborate," I said, smiling against his chest. "I just need you. The real you, not the reputation or the power. Just Dante. You have me," he promised. "All of me. The good, the bad, and everything in between." Our son was born on a snowy February morning after 16 hours of labor that Dante endured beside me with impressive calm despite his obvious terror. When Marco Alessandro Moretti finally entered the world, screaming his fury at the indignity of birth, I watched my dangerous, complicated, surprisingly tender boyfriend break down completely. "He's perfect," Dante whispered, tears streaming down his face as he held our son for the first time. "Gabriella? He's absolutely perfect. He looks like you," I said, exhausted but happy. Our son had Dante's dark hair, his father's stubborn jaw already evident even at hours old. "He has your eyes," Dante countered, studying Marco with absolute, "and your nose. He's the best of both of us." The transition was complete by the time Marco was 3 months old. Dante officially stepped back from all illegal operations, maintaining only his legitimate business interests. There were challenges associates who felt betrayed, rivals who saw his withdrawal as weakness, but Dante handled each with the strategic brilliance that had built his empire in the first place. We got married in a small ceremony when Marco was 6 months old, just family and close friends in Dante's penthouse overlooking the lake. I wore a simple dress that accommodated my post-pregnancy body, and Dante cried when he saw me walking toward him with our son in my arms. "You're everything," he said during our vows, his voice rough with emotion. "You and Marco, you're everything that matters. Everything worth fighting for. Everything I never knew I needed until you walked into my life." "You're my home," I replied, meaning it completely. "You and our son, my family, my future. Everything I was afraid of wanting but couldn't stop loving. Life wasn't perfect. We argued about parenting decisions, about boundaries with Dante's family, about the lingering security measures he insisted on maintaining despite the reduced threat level. But we learned to compromise, to communicate, to trust each other through disagreements. And every night, I'd watch Dante with our son, reading bedtime stories with theatrical voices, singing Italian lullabies his mother had taught him, promising Marco that he'd always be safe and loved and protected, and I'd feel grateful for the pregnancy test that had fallen from my purse 6 months ago. The test that had revealed my secret and forced me to face the truth, that sometimes the most terrifying risks lead to the most beautiful rewards. That love can bloom in unexpected places with impossible people. And that family isn't about perfect circumstances or safe choices, it's about showing up every day and choosing each other despite the complications. Dante Moretti had been my biggest fear and my greatest hope, and now he was my husband, my partner, the father of my child. The man who'd proven that people can change, that love can transform even the darkest pasts into brighter futures. "What are you thinking about?" Dante asked one evening, finding me in Marco's nursery watching our son sleep. "How different everything is from a year ago," I admitted. "How terrified I was when you found that pregnancy test." He wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "Are you still terrified?" "Sometimes," I said honestly. "But mostly I'm just grateful. For you, for Marco, for this life we built together." I turned in his arms, looked up at the man who'd changed everything. "I love you, Dante Moretti." "I love you, Gabriella Moretti," he replied, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "Thank you for giving me a chance, for not running forever, for letting me prove that I could be the man you and Marco deserve." "You are that man," I said softly. "You've always been that man. I just had to stop being afraid long enough to see it." Our son stirred in his crib, making the soft sounds that meant he'd be awake and demanding attention soon. Dante moved to pick him up, lifting Marco with the practiced ease of a devoted father. "Hey, little man," he murmured, settling our son against his chest. "Did you have a good nap?" Marco gurgled his response, his tiny hand gripping Dante's finger with impressive strength. And watching them together, my dangerous, reformed criminal holding our perfect, innocent son, I felt the last traces of fear finally dissolve. This was my family. Complicated, imperfect, built from impossible circumstances and terrifying risks, but ours. Real and solid and full of love. And I wouldn't change a single thing. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.